"Don't drink that." The words never left her mouth, but somehow Ethan Cole heard them anyway. The black waitress moved through the ballroom like she didn't belong in it. Quiet steps across polished marble floors, a silver tray balanced carefully in her hands, while Manhattan's wealthiest investors laughed beneath chandeliers worth more than most people's homes. The Crestmont Grand Hotel shimmered with old money and new power. Crystal glasses clinked beneath golden light. A jazz quartet played softly near the terrace overlooking Central Park. Every table smelled of expensive bourbon, imported cigars, and truffle butter melting over filet mignon. It was the kind of room where billion-dollar deals were made with handshakes and ruined with silence. And at the center of it all sat Ethan Cole, 39 years old. White, sharp jawline, navy Italian suit tailored so perfectly it looked stitched onto his body. Founder and CEO of Cole Dynamics, the defense technology empire Wall Street called untouchable. People feared Ethan more than they admired him. Not because he yelled. He rarely did. His power lived in the calmness, in the way he could end a career with one look across a conference table. Tonight was supposed to be another victory lap. A $600 million merger sat waiting on the other side of dinner, and everyone in the room knew it. Investors leaned toward him like planets orbiting the sun. Politicians smiled too hard when he spoke. Even the hotel staff moved faster near his table. Everyone except her. Naomi Brooks adjusted the glass of bourbon on Ethan's table with steady hands. Her dark curls tied neatly behind her head, her white dress shirt pressed perfectly beneath the black vest of the hotel uniform. She looked young, maybe 26, but her eyes carried the kind of exhaustion that age couldn't explain. People barely noticed her except when they needed something. More wine, more ice, another napkin. That was how rooms like this worked. Wealth made some people visible and erased everyone else. Naomi understood that better than anyone. She had spent 3 years serving men who spoke through her instead of to her. Men who snapped fingers instead of saying, "Excuse me." Men who looked at her skin before they looked at her face. But tonight felt wrong from the second she entered the ballroom. She noticed it first near the bar. Victor Hale, mid-40s, expensive gray suit, silver watch, smile too polished to be sincere. One of Ethan's potential merger partners. Naomi saw him standing near the reserved drinks table 10 minutes earlier while everyone watched a presentation on the main stage. At first it looked harmless. Just another executive checking his phone beside untouched glasses of bourbon prepared for the VIP table. But then she saw his hand move quickly inside his jacket pocket. A tiny vial. A fast pour. Clear liquid disappearing into one glass before anyone could notice. Naomi froze beside the service station, her pulse pounding against her ribs. Maybe she imagined it. Maybe there was an explanation. But Victor looked over his shoulder immediately afterward, not casually, not innocently, nervously, like a man checking whether anyone had seen him cross a line he couldn't uncross. Their eyes met for half a second. Victor's smile disappeared instantly. Then he walked away. Naomi's stomach tightened. Her father used to warn her about moments like this. Your instincts speak quietly, he once told her when she was 16. That's why most people ignore them. 3 years ago, her father died after drinking from the wrong glass at a downtown nightclub in Atlanta. Contaminated alcohol. Wrong place. Wrong moment. Nobody noticed until it was too late. Ever since then, Naomi watched people carefully, especially rich men who smiled too much. Across the ballroom, Ethan lifted his bourbon while the investors around him laughed at something he barely cared about. Victor sat 2 seats away now, pretending to relax, though sweat glistened faintly near his collar beneath the ballroom lights. Naomi stared at the amber liquid in Ethan's glass. Her breathing slowed. One decision. That was all this moment was. One choice that could destroy her life if she was wrong. Hotel security didn't tolerate accusations against billionaire guests. A waitress causing a scene at a high-profile merger dinner would be fired before midnight. Blacklisted by every luxury hotel in Manhattan by morning. But if she stayed silent and something happened to Ethan Cole, she would carry it forever. Ethan raised the glass toward his lips. Naomi moved before fear could stop her. Smoothly, quietly, like part of the service. She stepped beside the table and switched Ethan's bourbon with another untouched glass from her tray in one clean motion. No explanation. No warning. Just silence. The entire table froze. Ethan lowered the new glass slowly, staring at her hand. Victor stopped breathing, and somewhere beneath the soft jazz music and the glow of crystal chandeliers, Naomi realized every eye in the room was suddenly on her. The silence lasted only 3 seconds, but inside the Crestmont Grand Ballroom, it felt heavy enough to stop time itself. Ethan Cole looked down at the glass Naomi had placed in front of him, then slowly lifted his eyes toward her face. The jazz music near the terrace continued playing, but softer now somehow, drowned beneath the tension spreading across the room like cold smoke. A few investors exchanged confused glances. Someone near the end of the table let out an awkward chuckle, unsure whether this was a mistake or something worse. Naomi kept her posture straight even though her heartbeat slammed against her ribs hard enough to make her dizzy. She had broken protocol in front of some of the most powerful people in Manhattan. Every instinct told her to apologize immediately, to say she grabbed the wrong drink, to shrink herself before the room decided to crush her. But Victor Hale was staring at her now, and the fear behind his eyes felt too real to ignore. Ethan finally spoke, his voice low and controlled. "Did you just switch my glass?" Naomi swallowed carefully. "Yes, sir." His jaw tightened slightly. He did not raise his voice. Men like Ethan never needed to. Why? Around the table, conversations faded completely. Even the servers near the walls stopped moving. Naomi could feel them watching her, silently begging her not to create a scene that could cost everyone their jobs. Her manager, Denise Parker, appeared near the service entrance almost immediately, panic flashing across her face the second she realized which table Naomi was standing beside. Denise hurried forward in black heels, forcing a nervous smile. "I am so sorry, Mr. Cole. She is new to the VIP floor." Naomi had worked there almost 2 years. Ethan never looked away from Naomi. "I asked her a question." Denise froze. Victor leaned back in his chair, crossing one leg slowly over the other. "Probably just a misunderstanding," he said with a smooth laugh that sounded rehearsed. "These events get hectic." Naomi noticed the faint tremor in his hand when he reached for his water glass. Ethan noticed it too. The billionaire's eyes flickered toward Victor for less than a second before returning to Naomi. "Answer me." Naomi's throat tightened. This was the moment. The dangerous one. She could still step back, still pretend it was nothing. But then she looked at the untouched bourbon sitting quietly on her tray beside her hand, amber liquid glowing beneath chandelier light. And suddenly she remembered her father again. The hospital hallway. The smell of antiseptic. The doctor refusing to meet her eyes. One drink. One moment nobody questioned in time. Naomi took a careful breath. "I thought something was wrong with the other glass." The sentence landed like a crack across the table. Denise looked horrified. One investor nearly dropped his fork. Victor's expression hardened instantly before smoothing itself again. "Excuse me?" Ethan asked quietly. Naomi forced herself not to look away. "I saw someone near the drinks before dinner started." Victor laughed first this time, louder than before. "Too loud. Come on now," he said, shaking his head with fake amusement. "This is getting ridiculous." Ethan still did not touch the bourbon. He leaned back slightly in his chair, studying Naomi with the same cold precision he used in boardrooms before dismantling companies. "Are you accusing someone at this table of tampering with my drink?" Naomi hesitated just long enough for Victor to step in again. "Mr. Cole, with all due respect, this is exactly why staff should not insert themselves into private business events." His smile returned, but it no longer reached his eyes. People like her see one thing out of place, and suddenly they imagine a conspiracy. The words hung in the air sharp and ugly. People like her. Naomi felt every eye in the room shift toward her skin before quickly pretending not to. Ethan noticed that too. For a second his expression changed almost invisibly, like something uncomfortable had brushed against him. But then his face hardened again beneath the glow of the chandelier. "Do you have proof?" he asked. Naomi opened her mouth, then stopped. No, she had no proof. Only instinct. Only fear. Only the image of Victor pouring something into a glass while nobody watched. Denise stepped closer, desperation creeping into her voice now. "Naomi, apologize and go back to the kitchen." But Naomi could not move. Because Victor was sweating harder now despite the cool air flowing through the ballroom. Because Ethan still had not taken a sip. Because somewhere deep inside her chest, every instinct screamed that she was right. Across the table, One of the younger investors suddenly reached toward the untouched bourbon resting on Naomi's tray. "This whole thing is insane," he muttered with an irritated laugh. "If the drink is so dangerous, maybe we should all relax." Naomi's eyes widened instantly. "Wait." But the man had already lifted the glass. "Do not." Naomi's voice cut through the ballroom fast enough to stop the investor inches before the glass reached his lips. Every head turned again. The young investor blinked in surprise, his hand frozen midair while the amber bourbon trembled softly against the crystal. The jazz quartet near the terrace faltered for half a second before continuing again, quieter now beneath the pressure filling the room. Ethan Cole slowly stood from his chair. 6'2". Calm. Controlled. Dangerous in the way storms are dangerous before they finally break. His eyes locked onto Naomi with a sharpness that made Denise Parker step backward instinctively. Around them, billionaires, attorneys, hedge fund managers, and politicians watched in complete silence. Nobody touched their food anymore. Nobody cared about the merger presentation glowing forgotten across the giant digital screen behind the ballroom stage. The room no longer belonged to money tonight. It belonged to fear. Ethan extended his hand toward the investor. "Give me the glass." The investor obeyed immediately. Ethan studied the bourbon carefully beneath the chandelier light, rolling the liquid once inside the crystal tumbler. Victor Hale forced another uneasy smile. "Ethan, come on. We are turning a waiter mistake into a federal investigation now." "Waitress," Naomi corrected quietly before she could stop herself. Victor's jaw tightened. Ethan noticed that too. He noticed everything now. Naomi could see it happening in real time. The billionaire who walked into this dinner focused only on contracts and profit margins was suddenly watching people instead. Watching body language. Watching sweat. Watching fear. Ethan looked back at Naomi. "You are absolutely certain?" Naomi hesitated only because certainty felt dangerous. "No, sir," she admitted softly. "I am not certain. I just could not stay quiet." Something shifted across Ethan's face then. Small, almost invisible, but real. Before he could answer, one of the older investors near the center of the table suddenly laughed under his breath. "This is insane," he muttered. "We are letting a conspiracy theory ruin dinner." A few uncomfortable chuckles followed, though weaker this time. The investor reached for the glass again impatiently. "If nobody else wants this, I will drink it myself." Naomi's stomach dropped. "Please do not." But the man smiled dismissively. "Relax, sweetheart. It is bourbon, not cyanide." Ethan moved instantly, grabbing the investor's wrist before the glass touched his mouth. The ballroom froze again. Ethan did not look away from the older man. "Nobody drinks it." His tone left no room for argument. Victor shifted in his seat. "You cannot seriously believe this." Ethan finally turned toward him slowly. "I believe something about tonight feels wrong." Victor scoffed, but the sound cracked slightly under pressure. "Based on what?" "A waitress with a feeling." Ethan answered without emotion. "Sometimes feelings keep people alive." Naomi stared at him in surprise. Those were almost the exact words her father used to say. Denise stepped closer. Again, voice shaking now. "Mr. Cole, perhaps we should call hotel security and clear this misunderstanding quietly." Ethan ignored her completely. Instead, he walked toward Naomi until only a few feet separated them. Up close, the billionaire looked different than he had from across the room. Not softer, just more human. Tired eyes hidden behind confidence. A faint scar near his chin. Stress sitting heavily beneath polished perfection. "Tell me exactly what you saw," he said. Naomi glanced around the ballroom. Wealthy strangers stared back at her like she had stepped onto a stage she was never supposed to stand on. Her hands felt cold. But Victor Hale looked worse now. His breathing had changed. Tiny. Fast. Panicked. Naomi spoke carefully. "About 10 minutes before dinner started, I saw Mr. Hale standing near the reserved drinks table." Victor interrupted immediately. "This is ridiculous." Ethan raised one hand without looking at him. Silence returned instantly. Naomi continued. "I saw him pour something into one of the glasses." A murmur spread through the ballroom like wind moving across water. Victor stood so quickly his chair nearly tipped backward. "That is a lie." His voice came out louder than intended. Too loud. Several guests flinched. Ethan still did not react emotionally. Somehow that made the tension worse. "Sit down, Victor. You are going to believe her over me?" Ethan's eyes narrowed slightly. Right now I am listening. Victor laughed again, but there was no confidence left in it now. Only desperation hiding beneath polished arrogance. You really think I would poison a business partner at a public gala surrounded by cameras? Ethan looked toward the ballroom ceiling where dozens of discreet security cameras sat hidden between crystal light fixtures. The room suddenly became very still. Naomi saw the realization hit Victor 1 second too late. Ethan turned toward Denise. Call security. Victor's face lost color instantly. And for the first time all night, Naomi Brooks realized she might not have imagined any of it after all. The ballroom no longer sounded like a celebration. The music still played softly near the terrace, but now every piano note felt distant beneath the low panic spreading across the room. Conversations dissolved into whispers. Crystal glasses sat untouched. Phones slowly appeared beneath white tablecloths as guests pretended not to record what was happening. Because wealthy people understood one thing better than anyone. The moment fear entered a room, power shifted with it. Victor Hale stayed standing beside his chair, forcing calm into his expression even while tension crept visibly across his face. Ethan, he said carefully, lowering his voice now. You are about to destroy a multi-million-dollar partnership because a waitress made an accusation based on absolutely nothing. Ethan Cole did not answer immediately. He simply held the untouched bourbon glass in one hand while studying Victor with cold patience. Naomi noticed something unsettling then. Ethan was no longer angry. He was calculating. And men like him became most dangerous when they stopped reacting emotionally. Denise Parker returned moments later with 2 hotel security officers moving quickly through the ballroom in dark suits with earpieces hidden beneath their collars. Their presence changed the atmosphere instantly. Some guests quietly stepped farther from the table. Others stood completely still, pretending not to stare. One woman near the back whispered, "Oh my God," beneath her breath while her husband subtly lowered his phone camera. Victor spread his arms dramatically. This is unbelievable. Ethan finally spoke. Review the ballroom security footage from the last 30 minutes. One of the officers nodded immediately. Victor laughed sharply. Fine. Please do. But his confidence came half a second too late. Naomi saw it. Ethan saw it too. That tiny delay before the smile arrived. That tiny flash of panic men could not hide when control slipped away from them. The older investor who nearly drank the bourbon sank heavily into his chair now, suddenly pale beneath the golden chandelier light. He stared at the glass in Ethan's hand like it had transformed into something alive. Jesus Christ, he muttered quietly. Denise moved toward Naomi fast, grabbing her gently by the arm. Come with me. Right now. Naomi followed her several feet away from the table toward the service station near the ballroom entrance. The moment they stepped far enough from the guests, Denise's professional mask cracked completely. What were you thinking? She whispered harshly. Naomi's throat tightened. I could not ignore it. Denise rubbed both hands across her face in frustration. Do you understand who these people are? Naomi looked back toward the ballroom. Ethan stood near the center table, speaking quietly with security, while Victor paced near the windows overlooking Central Park. The skyline outside shimmered beneath midnight rain, clouds rolling slowly over Manhattan. Yes, Naomi answered softly. That is exactly why I could not ignore it. Denise stared at her for a long second, exhaustion replacing anger. You know what happens if you are wrong. Naomi nodded silently. Fired. Blacklisted. Humiliated online by morning. People like her did not survive scandals tied to billionaires. They disappeared beneath them. Across the ballroom, Victor suddenly pointed toward Naomi while speaking sharply to Ethan. His polished calmness was slipping faster now. Ethan barely reacted, but the coldness in his face deepened. One of the security officers approached, carrying a tablet connected directly to the hotel surveillance system. The ballroom quieted instantly again. Even the jazz quartet stopped playing this time. Every eye followed the officer as he handed the tablet to Ethan. Naomi's heartbeat pounded painfully inside her chest. Victor stepped forward quickly. This proves nothing, he snapped before anyone had even watched the footage. Too fast. Too defensive. Ethan looked up slowly from the tablet. Interesting response. Victor froze. The security officer cleared his throat nervously. Sir, the camera angle near the reserved drink station is partially blocked, but Ethan's eyes narrowed slightly while watching the screen. Naomi could not breathe. The officer continued carefully. Mr. Hale is visible approaching the table at approximately 8:42 p.m. Victor scoffed immediately. Because I grabbed my drink. Ethan remained silent. The officer hesitated again. There is also footage of him removing an object from his inside jacket pocket. A low murmur spread through the ballroom like electricity. Victor's face hardened instantly. A breath mint. Are we seriously doing this? But nobody laughed now. Nobody defended him. Because wealthy people trusted instincts when money was involved, and the room could smell fear on him now. Ethan replayed the footage once more in silence. Naomi watched his expression carefully. Something was changing behind his eyes. Not just suspicion. Reflection. He glanced briefly toward her across the ballroom, and for the first time all night, Naomi no longer looked invisible to him. Then suddenly another voice broke the silence. Sir. One of the waiters near the back service hallway stood frozen beside the ice station. I think someone needs medical assistance. Every head turned instantly. Near the center table, the older investor who had almost drunk the bourbon gripped the edge of his chair tightly, breathing unevenly as color drained rapidly from his face. And sitting only inches away from the untouched glass, Ethan Cole slowly realized how close death may have been sitting beside him all along. The ballroom erupted into movement without anyone actually raising their voice. Chairs slid quietly across marble floors. Expensive shoes rushed toward the older investor, while waiters stepped aside carrying untouched plates of food that no longer mattered. The man clutched the edge of the white linen tablecloth tightly, his breathing shallow and uneven as sweat gathered across his forehead beneath the chandelier light. Sir, can you hear me? One of the hotel staff asked carefully. The investor nodded weakly but could not speak immediately. Ethan Cole crossed the room fast, his expression sharper now than at any moment that night. Not panic. Calculation. Naomi watched him kneel beside the man, while security officers immediately cleared space around the table. Victor Hale remained near the windows overlooking Central Park, frozen between escape and explanation. The skyline behind him looked cold and silver beneath gathering rain clouds. Nobody in the ballroom looked at him the same way anymore. The illusion had cracked. One paramedic team from the hotel medical unit arrived within minutes, carrying emergency equipment through the grand ballroom doors. Their calm professionalism only made the room feel more serious. Guests whispered behind raised hands. Phones disappeared quickly once security began scanning the crowd. Nobody wanted their name attached to a possible poisoning investigation involving one of the richest technology executives in America. Naomi stood near the service station with her hands clasped tightly together to stop them from shaking. Denise Parker glanced at her repeatedly now, but differently than before. Less anger, more disbelief. Like she still could not understand how the quiet waitress from Brooklyn somehow became the center of a room filled with billionaires. One of the paramedics checked the older investor's pulse while another asked questions softly. Did you consume anything unusual tonight? The investor shook his head slowly. No, just dizziness. Ethan stood beside them, watching every detail carefully. Then his eyes drifted toward the untouched bourbon still sitting on the table. The glass suddenly looked darker now beneath the ballroom lights. He turned toward Naomi across the room, really looked at her this time. Not as staff. Not as background noise, as the woman who may have saved his life. Victor finally stepped forward again, forcing frustration into his voice. This is becoming insane. The man feels lightheaded, and suddenly everyone thinks there is poison in the room. Nobody answered him, because the fear inside the ballroom had already chosen its direction. Wealthy people trusted patterns more than words, and Victor's panic had become impossible to ignore. Ethan walked slowly back toward the table and picked up the bourbon glass once more. Have this tested immediately, he told security. One officer carefully sealed the glass inside an evidence bag, while cameras flashed quietly from the far corners of the room. Victor's face tightened. Ethan, think about what you are doing. Ethan's voice came back colder than the Manhattan rain outside. I am. The room fell silent again. Victor stepped closer, lowering his tone now. We have investors here. Board members. Press contacts. If this turns into a public scandal before the merger closes, both our companies lose billions. Ethan stared at him without blinking. Interesting choice of concern. Victor opened his mouth, then stopped, because suddenly the money sounded smaller than the accusation hanging in the air. Naomi watched Ethan carefully. Earlier that night, he looked untouchable. A man built from steel, contracts, and intimidation. But now something else moved beneath the surface. Betrayal. Not fear for himself exactly. Something deeper. The realization that someone sitting beside him at dinner may have wanted him gone. One of the paramedics finally stood. His vitals are stable. We recommend evaluation at the hospital to be safe. The older investor nodded shakily while assistants helped him toward the exit. As he passed Ethan, he glanced once toward the evidence bag containing the bourbon glass and quietly muttered, "That could have been you." Ethan said nothing, but Naomi saw the words land hard. Near the ballroom entrance, another security officer approached quickly holding a small clear plastic vial inside a sealed evidence pouch. "Sir," he said carefully to Ethan, "housekeeping located this beneath the reserved drink station." Victor's face drained instantly. The room noticed. Ethan accepted the pouch slowly, staring at the tiny, empty vial beneath the lights. Nobody breathed. Victor tried to laugh again, but the sound collapsed halfway out of his throat. Anybody could have dropped that. Ethan lifted his eyes toward him. Calm, precise, terrifying. That is true. Then his gaze shifted briefly toward Naomi, standing quietly near the service hallway. And anybody could have stayed silent tonight, too. The words hit harder than shouting ever could. Naomi felt her chest tighten unexpectedly. Because for the first time in years, someone powerful had not looked through her. They had finally seen her. Outside the towering ballroom windows, thunder rolled softly across Manhattan, while inside the Crestmont Grand Hotel, Ethan Cole slowly realized the woman everyone ignored had become the only reason he was still alive. Rain began, tapping softly against the towering glass windows of the Crestmont Grand while the ballroom sat trapped in a silence too heavy for music to fix. The jazz quartet had stopped completely now. Candle flames flickered across untouched plates of steak and melting butter, while billionaires whispered behind nervous smiles that no longer looked natural. The gala was over even if nobody had officially ended it. Security officers quietly blocked the ballroom exits. Hotel managers moved quickly between tables pretending to maintain order, but the illusion of luxury had cracked wide open. Fear had entered the room wearing a tuxedo. Victor Hale stood alone near the center table now, separated from everyone without anyone directly telling him to move. That was how rooms like this punished people. Not loudly, quietly. Social distance became judgment. Silence became accusation. Ethan Cole remained calm on the surface, but Naomi could see the storm building behind his eyes. He stood near the evidence bag containing the bourbon glass while another security officer spoke quietly into an earpiece beside him. Every few seconds, Ethan glanced toward Victor, then back toward Naomi, as if trying to piece together how the entire night had turned upside down because one waitress refused to stay silent. Denise Parker approached Naomi again near the service hallway, this time more carefully. "You should probably go home after this," she whispered. Naomi blinked. "Am I fired?" Denise hesitated. Earlier that answer would have been immediate. Now even she did not know anymore. "I honestly cannot tell what is happening tonight." Naomi looked around the ballroom slowly. Wealthy guests avoided eye contact with her now, but not because they looked down on her anymore. Because they did not know how to look at her. A few hours ago she was invisible. Now she was the reason the most powerful man in the room might still be alive. That kind of shift made people uncomfortable. One of the younger female investors near the back suddenly stepped toward Naomi, holding her phone tightly against her chest. "I just wanted to say," she paused awkwardly. "That was brave." Naomi gave a small polite nod, unsure how to respond. The woman smiled faintly before walking away again, disappearing back into the crowd of dark suits and designer dresses. Ethan noticed the interaction from across the room. Something about it stayed with him. Because he realized nobody had called Naomi brave earlier tonight. They called her staff, sweetheart, waitress, people like her. But bravery looked different when it interrupted power. Near the ballroom entrance, 2 New York Police Department detectives arrived in plain dark coats damp from the rain outside. The energy inside the room shifted instantly again. Victor's shoulders stiffened. Ethan walked directly toward the detectives while security handed over the evidence bag and surveillance footage. Naomi could not hear every word from across the room, but she heard enough. Possible attempted poisoning. The phrase moved through the ballroom like ice water. Several guests quietly reached for their phones again. Victor stepped forward sharply. This has gone too far. One detective looked at him calmly. Then you should not mind answering questions. Victor forced a smile that no longer convinced anyone. Of course not. But sweat glistened visibly near his collar, now despite the cold air flowing through the ballroom vents. Ethan folded his arms slowly. You seemed very concerned about the drink before anyone mentioned poison publicly. Victor turned toward him instantly. Because she accused me in front of everyone. Ethan's voice stayed low. No. She warned me. The difference between those two sentences landed heavily in the room. Naomi felt her chest tighten unexpectedly hearing it. Warn me. Not embarrassed me. Not attacked me. Warn me. For the first time all night. Ethan Cole sounded less like a billionaire protecting his reputation and more like a man confronting mortality. One detective approached Naomi carefully. Miss Brooks. She nodded. We will need a formal statement. Naomi swallowed hard. Statements meant investigations. Investigations meant headlines. Headlines meant her life would never feel normal again after tonight. She glanced toward Ethan instinctively. He noticed. She cooperated because she thought someone was in danger, he said firmly before the detective could continue. Make sure that is remembered. Naomi stared at him in surprise. Ethan met her eyes fully now. No arrogance. No dismissal. Just something quieter. Respect beginning to form where indifference used to live. Outside the windows, lightning flashed faintly above Manhattan, turning the skyline silver for one brief second. Inside the ballroom, the detectives escorted Victor toward a quieter private conference room for questioning, while dozens of wealthy guests watched silently from their tables. Nobody defended him anymore. Nobody moved to stand beside him. Power had abandoned him faster than friendship ever could. Ethan remained standing alone near the center of the ballroom long after Victor disappeared through the side doors. Then slowly, almost uncertainly, he looked toward Naomi Brooks again. And for the first time in years, the billionaire who controlled everything realized his life had been saved by someone he would never have noticed before tonight. By 1:30 in the morning, the Crestmont Grand no longer looked like a luxury gala. It looked like the aftermath of a storm people were pretending had never happened. Half the guests had quietly disappeared into waiting black SUVs outside the hotel entrance. The remaining investors gathered in small, nervous circles beneath dimmed chandeliers, whispering over untouched desserts and melting ice. Waiters cleared tables in silence while detectives moved carefully between private conference rooms carrying folders, tablets, and evidence bags. Rain streamed steadily down the massive windows overlooking Manhattan, turning the city lights blurry and distant like a dream beginning to collapse. Naomi Brooks stood alone near the back service hallway holding a folded white linen napkin in trembling hands. Her shift should have ended hours ago, but time no longer felt normal tonight. Every few minutes another hotel employee passed her with wide eyes and hushed curiosity. Some offered small smiles. Others simply stared. Nobody knew what to say to the waitress who may have stopped a billionaire from dying in the middle of a gala. Denise Parker approached quietly, carrying 2 paper coffee cups from the staff kitchen downstairs. You look like you need this, she said softly. Naomi accepted the cup carefully. Thank you. Denise leaned beside her against the hallway wall, exhaustion heavy beneath her makeup now. You know, she admitted after a moment, when you switched that glass, I thought you lost your mind. Naomi let out a faint laugh for the first time all night. Honestly, I thought so too. Denise shook her head slowly. Most people in this building would have stayed quiet. Naomi stared down into the coffee. Most people are afraid. Denise looked toward the ballroom entrance where detectives still moved in and out under soft golden light. And you were not. Naomi thought about that carefully. Fear had lived inside her all night. Fear of losing her job. Fear of being humiliated. Fear of being dismissed the second she opened her mouth. But some fears felt heavier than embarrassment. I was terrified, she admitted quietly. I just could not watch someone die again. Denise glanced toward her. Naomi immediately wished she had not said that last word out loud. But Denise's expression softened instead of becoming curious. Sometimes people recognized pain without needing details. Across the ballroom, Ethan Cole remained seated alone at the massive VIP table where the merger dinner had started hours earlier. The room around him slowly emptied, but he barely seemed to notice. His suit jacket rested over the back of his chair now, tie loosened slightly for the first time all night. One detective sat across from him, reviewing timelines and surveillance notes, while another officer photographed the evidence gathered from the ballroom. Ethan answered every question calmly, but his focus drifted repeatedly toward the service hallway where Naomi stood. Eventually, the detectives closed their folders and stood. "We will contact you tomorrow regarding formal charges and additional statements," one of them said. Ethan nodded once. "Keep me updated." The detectives left quietly, disappearing toward the elevators while security officers continued guarding the ballroom entrance. For the first time all night, Ethan finally sat, completely alone beneath the chandeliers. Naomi watched him from a distance. Earlier, he looked larger than the room itself. Untouchable, the kind of man whose presence bent everyone around him. But now he looked different somehow. Human, tired, like someone who had spent years building walls only to realize none of them mattered when mortality entered the room. Ethan slowly looked up and noticed Naomi watching him. Neither spoke at first. Then finally, he stood and walked toward her across the nearly empty ballroom. Every step felt strangely quiet against the marble floor. Denise immediately straightened beside Naomi. "Mr. Cole," she said carefully. Ethan gave a small nod without taking his eyes off Naomi. "Can I speak with her alone?" Denise hesitated only briefly before stepping away toward the kitchen corridor. Naomi suddenly became aware of how loud her own heartbeat sounded in the silence between them. Ethan stopped only a few feet away. Up close, the billionaire looked exhausted now. The sharp confidence that once surrounded him had cracked enough for something more honest to show through. For a long moment, he said nothing at all. Then quietly, almost like the words surprised even him, he asked, "Why did you do it?" Naomi blinked softly. "What? You barely know me." Rain tapped steadily against the windows behind him while the last candles flickered low across the empty ballroom. Ethan's voice dropped further. Most people in that room would have protected themselves first. Naomi looked at him carefully. The billionaire who controlled billion-dollar companies suddenly sounded less interested in business than in understanding humanity itself. She thought about her father again, about the hospital hallway, about silence becoming regret. Then she answered honestly, "Because somebody should have warned him before it was too late." Ethan stared at her quietly after that. And somewhere beneath the fading lights of the Crestmont Grand, the most powerful man in the room realized the woman standing in front of him possessed something money had never been able to buy. The rain had stopped by the time Naomi Brooks finally stepped out of the Crestmont Grand just after 3 in the morning, but Manhattan still glistened beneath the streetlights like the city itself had been washed clean. Black cars lined the curb outside the hotel entrance while exhausted staff members slipped quietly through revolving doors carrying garment bags and empty trays from a night nobody would forget. The cold air hit Naomi's face gently as she wrapped her thin coat tighter around herself and descended the marble steps toward the sidewalk. Her feet ached, her head pounded, and somewhere deep inside her chest, the adrenaline that carried her through the night was finally beginning to fade into exhaustion. Across the street, neon reflections shimmered in puddles while taxis rolled slowly through wet intersections beneath the glow of Times Square advertisements in the distance. New York never really slept. It only changed moods. Naomi reached into her purse for her subway card when she heard footsteps behind her. "Miss Brooks." She turned slowly. Ethan Cole stood near the hotel entrance beneath the gold canopy lights, one hand inside the pocket of his dark overcoat, while security officers waited discreetly several feet behind him. Even at 3 in the morning, the billionaire still carried that quiet gravity around him. But something about him looked different now. Less polished, less untouchable. The storm inside him had changed shape tonight. Naomi stopped walking. "You are still here?" Ethan glanced briefly back toward the hotel lobby. Apparently, attempted murder generates paperwork. The dry humor surprised her enough to let out a small, tired laugh. Ethan noticed. For a moment, neither spoke. Traffic hummed softly down the avenue while steam drifted upward from street vents into the cold Manhattan air. Finally, Ethan stepped closer. "You are taking the subway home?" Naomi shrugged lightly. That is usually how normal people get around New York. Another faint smile touched the corner of Ethan's mouth before disappearing again. "Let my driver take you home." Naomi immediately shook her head. "That is not necessary." "I know." His answer came quietly. "I would still rather know you made it home safely." Naomi hesitated. Men like Ethan Cole were not used to hearing no, but somehow his offer did not sound controlling. It sounded sincere. That almost made it more unsettling. I live in Brooklyn, she said carefully. I know. Naomi blinked. Ethan quickly clarified. Your employee file. Security asked for staff records earlier. The explanation sounded reasonable enough, but something about it still made her strangely aware that the most powerful man she had ever met suddenly knew where she lived. Ethan noticed her hesitation instantly. You do not have to say yes. Naomi looked back toward the glowing hotel windows towering above them. Hours ago, she walked into that building invisible. Now detectives had her statement. Investors knew her name. And Ethan Cole stood outside in the middle of the night, offering her a ride home like she mattered. Life could change direction so fast, it almost felt unreal. Before she could answer, the hotel doors opened again behind Ethan. One of his assistants hurried outside carrying a tablet and speaking quickly. Sir, the lab results just came back. Ethan's expression sharpened immediately, and the assistant lowered his voice, but Naomi still heard the words clearly in the quiet street. The bourbon tested positive for a toxic sedative compound. Silence settled heavily between them. Even the city noise suddenly felt farther away. Ethan slowly looked toward Naomi again. This time there was no uncertainty left in his eyes. No suspicion, no calculation, just the full weight of realization. She had been right. The assistant continued quietly. Detectives are moving forward with formal charges against Mr. Hale. Ethan barely reacted to the news, because his attention stayed locked on Naomi now. The woman who trusted her instincts when nobody else would have. Naomi swallowed hard as the reality finally settled over her too. If she had stayed silent for even 30 more seconds, Ethan likely would have taken that drink. The thought sent a chill through her stronger than the cold night air. Ethan stepped closer slowly, not as a billionaire approaching staff, not as a man speaking to someone beneath him, just human to human. You saved my life tonight. Naomi looked away, briefly toward the wet city streets. Compliments always made her uncomfortable, especially this kind. I just paid attention. Ethan shook his head softly. No, you acted. The distinction mattered more than either of them expected, because thousands of people notice wrong things every day. Very few risk themselves to stop them. A black SUV pulled quietly toward the curb behind Ethan, while his security team waited respectfully at a distance. Naomi looked at the open car door, then back at the subway entrance farther down the block, glowing beneath flickering station lights. Two different worlds sitting less than 50 feet apart. Ethan followed her gaze carefully. You still do not trust me. Naomi answered honestly. I do not really know you. Ethan accepted that without offense. Maybe because for the first time in years, someone spoke to him without wanting something in return. Rainwater dripped slowly from the hotel awning above them, while Manhattan shimmered cold and silver beneath the fading night. Then quietly, almost to himself, Ethan said, I think tonight proved I did not know myself very well either. The city was beginning to wake when Naomi Brooks finally reached her apartment in Brooklyn. Early morning light spilled softly across wet sidewalks, while delivery trucks rumbled through narrow streets, and tired commuters drifted toward coffee shops carrying umbrellas and briefcases. The world looked ordinary again. That was the strange thing about surviving extraordinary nights. The sun still rose afterward like nothing happened. Naomi climbed the worn apartment stairs slowly, exhaustion heavy in every step. Her small third-floor walk-up smelled faintly like old radiator heat and cinnamon from the bakery downstairs opening for the morning rush. Inside, her apartment was quiet except for rainwater tapping gently against the fire escape outside the kitchen window. She dropped her purse onto the counter and stood still for a long moment staring into the silence. Hours earlier, she had stood beneath crystal chandeliers surrounded by billionaires and detectives. Now she stood barefoot on cracked tile floors beside a sink full of dishes she forgot to wash before. Work. Two completely different worlds. And somehow, for one impossible night, they collided. Naomi turned on the small television near the couch mostly for background noise while she removed her earrings and loosened the tight, not holding back her curls. The morning news flashed across the screen immediately. Breaking overnight in Manhattan, the anchor announced. Authorities are investigating what sources describe as a possible attempted poisoning involving tech billionaire Ethan Cole during a private investment gala at the Crestmont Grand Hotel. Naomi froze. Grainy cell phone footage filled the screen next. The ballroom. The flashing police lights outside the hotel. Guests covering their faces from cameras. Then suddenly, a blurry image of Naomi herself appeared stepping beside Ethan's table holding the silver tray. Witnesses say an employee intervened moments before the alleged incident. The reporter continued. Cole Dynamics has declined public comment. Naomi slowly sat down on the edge of her couch. Her chest tightened. Overnight, her life had become a headline. She reached for the remote to turn the television off when her phone suddenly buzzed across the kitchen counter. Unknown number. Naomi hesitated before answering. Hello. Good morning, Miss Brooks. The voice was calm, polished, unmistakable. Ethan Cole. Naomi sat straighter immediately. How did you get this number? Ethan let out the faintest breath of amusement. You work for a hotel that keeps employee records. Naomi rubbed tiredly at her forehead. Right. There was a brief silence between them, filled only by distant city traffic outside her apartment window. Then Ethan spoke again, quieter this time. I hope I did not wake you. Naomi glanced at the untouched coffee maker in her kitchen and the sunlight already rising across Brooklyn rooftops. I do not think sleep is happening tonight. Another small silence followed. But unlike earlier, this one felt less tense, less guarded. Ethan finally said, the detectives confirmed everything this morning. Naomi closed her eyes briefly. Hearing it aloud still felt unreal somehow. Victor confessed? Not fully, but enough evidence exists now that he does not have many options left. Ethan paused carefully. The toxicology report confirmed the compound could have stopped my heart combined with alcohol. Naomi looked down at her trembling hands. One decision, one moment, one switched glass. That was all that separated life from tragedy sometimes. Ethan's voice softened further. You saved me. Naomi leaned back slowly against the couch cushions. You already said that. I know. His answer came almost immediately. I just do not think I understood it completely until now. Outside her apartment window, sunlight finally pushed through the gray rain clouds hanging over New York. Somewhere below, a car horn echoed through the street while the bakery downstairs opened its front doors to morning customers. Life moving forward again. Ethan spoke once more. There is something else. Naomi waited quietly. Your manager informed me the hotel placed you on temporary leave pending media attention. Naomi laughed softly under her breath, though there was no humor in it. Of course they did. Heroism looked good on television until it complicated business. I figured. Ethan's voice sharpened slightly. You should not be punished for doing the right thing. Naomi stared at the worn wooden floor beneath her feet. That is not usually how the world works. Ethan fell silent after that because deep down, he knew she was right. Men like him benefited from systems that often ignored people like her until they became useful. But something about nearly dying had stripped away the luxury of pretending not to notice anymore. Finally, he said quietly, maybe the world works that way because too many people with power stay comfortable. Naomi blinked slightly at the honesty in his voice. The billionaire who once measured life in leverage and negotiations suddenly sounded like a man confronting himself for the first time. Ethan continued carefully. I spent years believing control was strength. Money, influence, reputation. But none of that mattered last night. Naomi listened silently. The only thing that mattered, he said softly, was whether one person chose to care. Her throat tightened unexpectedly. Outside, Brooklyn moved through another ordinary morning while inside a tiny apartment. Two people from completely different worlds sat connected by one impossible night neither of them would ever forget. Ethan finally spoke one last time. Thank you, Naomi. Not polished, not performative, just honest. Naomi looked out the window toward the waking city glowing gold beneath the morning sun and answered quietly, You are welcome. And somewhere far beyond the billion-dollar towers of Manhattan, Ethan Cole finally understood a truth no boardroom had ever taught him. Power may command attention, but grace is what saves lives.